It was summer-time and twilight. We were sitting on the porch of the farmhouse on the summit of the hill, and Aunt Rachel was sitting respectfully below our level on the steps, for she was our servant, and colored. She was of mighty frame and stature. She was 60 years old, but her eye was undimmed and her strength unabated. She was a cheerful, hearty soul, and it was no more trouble for her to laugh than it is for a bird to sing. She was under fire now, as usual when the day was done. That is to say, she was being chaffed without mercy, and was enjoying it. She would let off peal after peal of laughter, and then sit with her face in her hands, and shake with throes of enjoyment which she could no longer get breath enough to express. At such a moment as this, a thought occurred to me, and I said, "Aunt Rachel, how is it that you've lived 60 years and never had any trouble?" She stopped quaking. She paused, and there was a moment of silence. She turned her face over her shoulder toward me, and said, without even a smile in her voice, "Mr. C., is you in earnest?" It surprised me a good deal, and it sobered my manner and my speech, too. I said, "Why, I thought, that is, I meant, why, you can't have had any trouble. I've never heard you sigh, and never seen your eye when there wasn't a laugh in it." She faced fairly around now, and was full of earnestness. "Has I had any trouble? Mr. C., I's gwine to tell you, den I leave it to you. I was born down 'mongst de slaves. I knows all 'bout slavery, 'case I been one of 'em my own self. Well, sah, my old man, that's my husband, he was lovin' and kind to me, just as kind as you is to your own wife. And we had chillen, 7 chillen, and we loved dem chillen just the same as you loves yo' chillen. They was black, but the Lord can't make no chillen so black but what they mother loved them and wouldn't give 'em up. No, not for anything that's in this whole world. Well, sir, I was raised in old Virginia, but my mother, she was raised in Maryland, and my souls, she was terrible when she'd get started. My land, but she'd make the fur fly. When she'd get into them tantrums, she always had one word that she said. She'd straighten herself up and put her fists in her hips and say, "I want you to understand that I wa'n't born in de mash to be fooled by trash. I's one of the old blue hen's chickens, I is. 'Case you see, that's what folks that's born in Maryland calls deyselves, and dey's proud of it." Well, that was her word. I don't ever forget it, because she said it so much, and because she said it one day when my little Henry tore his wrists awful, and most busted his head right up at the top of his forehead, and the niggers didn't fly around fast enough to tend to him. And when they talked back at her, she up and she says, "Look-a-here," she says, "I want you niggers to understand that I wa'n't born in the mash to be fooled by trash. I's one of the old blue hen's chickens, I is." And then she cleared that kitchen and bandaged up the child herself. So I says that word too, when I's riled. Well, by and by, my old mistus say she's broke, and she got to sell all the niggers on the place. And when I hear that they gwine to sell us off at auction in Richmond, oh, the good gracious, I know what that mean. Aunt Rachel had gradually risen while she warmed to her subject, and now she towered above us, black against the stars. They put chains on us and put us on a stand as high as this porch, 20 foot high. And all the people stood around, crowds and crowds, and they come up dar and look us all round and squeeze our arm and make us get up and walk, and then say, This one's too old, or this one lame, or this one don't mount to much. And they sold my old man and took him away. And they began to sell my children and take them away. And I began to cry, and the man say, "Shut up, your damn blubbering," and hit me on the mouth with his hand. And when the last one was gone but my little Henry, I grabbed him close up to my breast, so, and I riz up and says, "You shan't take him away." I says, "I'll kill the man that touches him," I says. But my little Henry whispered and say, "I want to run away, and then I work and buy your freedom." Oh, bless the child. He always so good. But they got him. They got him, the men did. But I took and tear the clothes most off of him and beat him over the head with my chain, and they give it to me, too. But I didn't mind that. Well, there was my old man gone, and all my children, all my 7 children, and 6 of 'em I hain't set eyes on again to this day, and that's 22 years ago last Easter. The man that bought me belonged in New Bern, and he took me there. Well, by and by the years roll on and the war come. My master, he was a Confederate colonel, and I was his family's cook. So when the Unions took that town, they all run away and left me all by myself with the other niggers in that monstrous big house. So the big Union officers move in there, and they asked me would I cook for them. "Lord bless you," says I, "that's what I's for." They warn't no small fry officers, mind you. They was the biggest they is, and the way they made them soldiers mosey round. The general, he told me to boss that kitchen, and he say, "If anybody come meddling with you, you just make 'em walk chalk. Don't you be afeard," he say. "You 'mong friends now." Well, I thinks to myself, if my little Henry ever got a chance to run away, he'd make to the north, of course. So one day I comes in there where the big officers was, in the parlor, and I drops a kerchie, so, and I up and told 'em about my Henry. They are listening to my troubles just the same as if I was white folks. And I says, what I come for is because if he got away and got up north where you gemmen comes from, you might have seen him maybe, and could tell me so's I could find him again. He was very little, and he had a scar on his left wrist and at the top of his forehead. Then they look mournful, and the general say, "How long since you seen him?" And I say, 13 year. Then the general say, "He wouldn't be little no more now. He's a man." I never thought of that before. He was only that little feller to me yet. I never thought about him growing up and being big. But I see it then. None of the gemmen had run across him, so they couldn't do nothing for me. But all that time, though I didn't know it, my Henry was run off to the north years and years, and he was a barber too, and worked for himself. And by, when the war come, he up and he says, "I's done barbering," he says. "I's gwine to find my old mammy, less'n she's dead." So he sold out and went to where they was recruiting, and hired himself out to the colonel for his servant. And then he went all through the battles everywhere, hunting for his old mammy. Yes, indeedy, he'd hire the first one officer and then another, till he'd ransacked the whole South. But you see, I didn't know nothing about this. How was I going to know it? Well, one night we had a big soldier ball. The soldiers there at New Bern was always having balls and carrying on. They had 'em in my kitchen heaps of times, 'cause it was so big. Mind you, I was down on sich doin's, because my place was with the officers, and it rasped me to have them common soldiers cavorting round my kitchen like that. But I always stood around and kept things straight, I did. And sometimes they'd get my dander up, and then I'd make 'em clear that kitchen, man, I tell you. Well, one night, it was a Friday night, There comes a whole platoon from a nigger regiment that was on guard at the house. The house was headquarters, you know, and then I was just a bilin'. Mad, I was just a boomin'. I swelled around and swelled around. I just was a itchin' for them to do something for me to start me. And they was a waltzin' and a dancin'. My, but they was havin' a time. And I just a swellin' and a swellin' up. Pretty soon, long comes sich a spruce young nigger a-sailin' down the room with a yaller wench round the waist, and round and round and round they went, enough to make a body drunk to look at 'em. And when they got abreast of me, they went to balancing around, first on one leg and then on t'other, and smilin' at my big red turban and makin' fun, and I ups and says, "Get along with you, rubbage." The young man's face kind of changed all of a sudden, for about a second, but then he went to smilin' again, same as he was before. Well, 'bout this time, in come some niggers that played music and belonged to the band, and they never could get along without putting on airs. And the very first air they put on that night, I lit into 'em. They laughed, and that made me wuss. The rest of the niggers got to laughing, and then my soul alive, but I was hot. My eye was just a-blazin'. I just straightened myself up, so, just as I is now, plumb to the ceiling most, and I digs my fists into my hips, and I says, "Look-a-here," I says, "I want you niggers to understand that I wa'n't born in the mash to be fooled by trash. I's one of the old blue hen's chickens, I is." And then I see that young man stand a-staring and stiff, looking kind of up at the ceiling like he forgot something and couldn't remember it no more. Well, I just march on them niggers, so, looking like a general, and they just cave away before me and out at the door. And as this young man was a-going out, I hear him say to another nigger, "Jim," he says, "you go along and tell the cap I'll be alonghand 'bout 8 o'clock in the morning. They's something on my mind," he says. "I don't sleep no more this night. You go along," he says, "and leave me by my own self." This was about 1 o'clock in the morning. Well, 'bout 7 I was up and on hand getting the officers' breakfast. I was a-stooping down by the stove, just so, same as if your foot was the stove, and I'd opened the stove door with my right hand, so, pushing it back, just as I pushes your foot, and I just got the pan of hot biscuits in my hand and was about to raise up, when I see a black face come around under mine, and the eyes a looking up into mine, just as eyes are looking up close under your face now. And I just stopped right dar and never budged, just gazed and gazed, so, and the pan began to tremble, and all of a sudden I knowed. The pan dropped on the floor, and I grabbed his left hand and shoved back his sleeve, just so, as I was doing to you. And then I goes for his forehead and pushed the hair back so. And boy, I says, if you ain't my Henry, what is you doing with this welt on your wrist and that scar on your forehead? The Lord God of heaven be praised. I got my own again. Oh, no, Mr. C. I ain't had no trouble and no joy